Hello, beautiful ones, and welcome to another episode of Taking Time to Heal. So, firstly, apologies. I've had a bit of a gap, mainly because there's been stuff going on in the background. In case you haven't seen, I've been running a free course on healing with the elements. And if you missed it, do not worry, because on my website you can now access it, and it is completely free, and it is all about how we can use the elements as this beautiful framework for our healing. Now, this isn't new, right? Using the elements for our healing is not new. It's been around for thousands of years. But there is so much potential in it. There is so much magic in it. And there is some amazing resources. So if that is something that is of interest to you, then I will put the link in the show notes below. But on that note, before we dive in to today's topic, and we've got a juicy one today because I wanted to talk a little bit more about this time of year and what is happening energetically and how we can utilize this to our advantage. Not just, I talk a lot about staying in balance, working with the seasons in terms of the energy so that we don't go out of balance. But there's also this beautiful way that we can harness the energies of the seasons in our life so that we can absolutely get the most magic from the season. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about that today. But before I do, there's some other things I want to update you on. So first of all, in case you haven't seen, over on Instagram, I have a brand new Instagram channel because I'm not sure if I mentioned or not, but in the middle of Mercury retrograde, I'm sure I told you I was having no end of tech problems, and it really was no end. I lost access to my membership platform. I lost access to, I think, my podcast and my emails and so many different things. But another thing that had happened during that time, which I kind of didn't even think too much about because there was too many other things going on, was I lost access to my Instagram account. It got taken over by hackers, and then there was this whole rigmarole of trying to go back and forth with Instagram, and I don't know if you've been through that process before, but it's often not very fruitful. And long story short, I have had to start my Instagram channel from absolute scratch, which is a bit of a nightmare because I have found out since that you can't go live on Instagram unless you've got more than 1,000 followers. And somehow I had missed this, probably because it had never been an issue before. But to celebrate the launch of my new Instagram page, over the course of October, I'm going to be sharing with you 30 days of self-care to pop into your book of shadows. So, one, you may not know what a book of shadows is, so let me go there. So a book of shadows is often used by people that resonate with witchcraft or the witch's path, or see themselves as that kind of witch archetype and work with, herbs, plants, magic, medicine. There's so many different types of witches, so I am not going into all of that. I personally don't necessarily class myself as a witch. I get called a witch by many people. I have no problem with being called a witch, but it's not necessarily a label that I've taken on. However, it's funny because I've been reading a couple of witchcrafty books over the past few years, and on paper I kind of tick every box. And I do love witchcraft. But this idea of our Book of Shadows is that place where we record our experiments, right? So whether those experiments are in regards to magic, or in regards to herbal wisdom, or in regards to rituals and practices and meditations, or understanding your own rhythms and patterns when it comes to the month, the year. You know, you've probably guessed by now, I'm a lady who loves rhythms. And when I say I love rhythms, those rhythms are there. It's just so many of us haven't been taught them or shown them or had access to the wisdom that is available that can show how things shift and change throughout the month and also throughout the year. So long story short, your Book of Shadows is your little book. I say little book, it can be whatever size you like, but it is your book of you documenting what works for you. So over these 30 days, I'm going to be sharing little practices, little bits of knowledge, little rituals, and actually I'm going to be sharing so much. I've got so much lined up during these 30 days of sharing with you things that you might want to take away, practice with, experiment with, and record in your Book of Shadows. Now, what I do want to mention here is a Book of Shadows is slightly different to a grimoire. So I'm just going to touch on this point because I've had a couple of conversations with people after posting about this 30 days of the Book of Shadows, and what's the difference between a Book of Shadows and a grimoire. So for those that don't know, a Book of Shadows is the place, as I said, that we record our experiments, where we note what's working, what's not working, where we try different things out and we document them and we reflect on them and we contemplate. It's basically like a working journal for what's going on. A grimoire is when we've nailed it, right? When we've nailed the things that work for us, or just work full stop, and we're ready to transfer it over to a grimoire where it's like, this is what works, this is the end result. And you know, I love the idea of passing that grimoire down to the next generation and the next generation. I would love to do that, actually, just thinking about that, whether I can like create my own little grimoire that I can pass down to my kids. Interesting. I'm going to think about that. Okay, so my point being, I would love for you to join me over on Instagram. This is happening throughout October. And I think it's going to be a really lovely journey that we can undertake together. So it would mean the world to me if you could hop over and follow my brand new Instagram page. And I promise, once I reach 1,000 followers, there will be more lives from me on that platform. So go check that out. Anything else I need to tell you? Well, we do have some beautiful things coming up in the membership. So if you don't know much about my membership space, the Medicine Woman Collective, it is a place where every month we look at a new topic related to holistic wellness, holistic healing, and I try to make them as juicy as possible. So this month, we are utilizing the energies of the season. In fact, I tend to tie everything in to the energy of what's going on right then. So you'll remember in last podcast, I talked about the fact that we're going into Vata season and we're seeing that rise of air and ether. And because of this, it is a really powerful time to be doing spiritual work or work on a really subtle level. So this month inside the membership, when I say this month, I'm talking October. And I think I've just smudged my makeup. There we go. So this month in the membership for October, we are having a 4-week dream work series. Now, there's so many different ways that we can look at this, and, depending on our own personal belief system. But even if you have no spiritual beliefs whatsoever, what we know is that the dream state is a fabulous way that we can tap in to our subconscious, or that which is operating in the background unconsciously, right? So when we're doing healing work, we're working often on this plane, on the unconscious, on the subconscious, because it's those things that are happening in the background, those things that we do on autopilot, that is often keeping us stuck, that's keeping us repeating old patterns, that's, leading to us making those really unhelpful choices over and over again without even meaning to. And then we get to that point and we're like, how are we here again? I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be doing something new. And before you know it, you're back where you started. So working on the subconscious is one of the most powerful things that we can do in our healing journey. And so in the membership, we are utilizing this air and ether by working with the dream state. We're going to be doing a 4-week journey where we learn to work with our dreams. We learn to become more lucid in our dream. We can start interacting with our subconscious and rewriting what we want that to be going forward. So that's the psychology viewpoint, the kind of basic psychology viewpoint. But there's also the view that actually the dream world is the real world, and this is the real dream. This waking world is just an illusion. Now, we see this in, not just one path. We see this idea very much rooted in shamanism, but we also see it in terms of the teachings of the Buddha, potentially some things in the Vedas. But this idea that actually, when we connect into that dream world, into that dream landscape, whether we're doing that through shamanic journeying, dream work, plant medicine, there's so many different ways, as well as so many other therapies that tap into the subconscious. But when we're working with that state of consciousness, we're actually able to connect more to spirit. And I'm using spirit as a collective term there. So spirit, what I mean by spirit in this context is anything that's not on this plane of existence that we're able to interact with. So if you believe in spirit guides, angels, deities of any shape or form, then this kind of dream work is a great way that we can remove some of those barriers, get direct guidance, get direct wisdom. And even if you don't see it like that, you can tap into that idea of the higher self. So that higher self, that part of you that is wise and compassionate and knowing, and she's not dictated to by fear or these kind of really basic emotions, is what I want to say. That kind of emotional body does not define the action she takes or the things that she says yes to. It comes from what she knows her soul is here to do. So anyway, it's going to be an awesome month inside the membership. I would love for you to join us. I will also put that link in the show notes. And finally, one final thing to let you know. The doors are open to the apprenticeship program. I think I've got 2 spaces left now. So it's getting a bit tight. So I just wanted to remind you that if you're interested in learning more about the medicine woman ways, including, I'll be honest, I have crammed into this program so much that actually you're walking away with, I think it's like 4 or 5 certificates. So we go into so many different things, like how you can coach on a way that's really impactful, how you can use breath work, plant medicine, herbalism. We're going into Ayurveda, we're going into shamanism, we're going into ancient philosophy. So we're tying in the Vedas, we're tying in Buddhism. But the whole point of the program is not just to go, there's a load of tools, right? I've designed this program so it's, here's the tools, and you're the medicine woman that gets to pick and choose and take a bit of that and a bit of this and create this signature, I say, program or offering or service that is completely aligned to you. So through that program, we have one-to-one support with me, as well as the group trainings and that group support. You also have that time with me so we can focus in on your own healing. So when it comes to sharing these practices, you're coming at it from a place of integrity rather than, and please don't think I'm being disrespectful here, but I often see a lot of parroting out in the healing world. And what I mean by this, and this is like a really normal part of our journeys, I just want to be really clear about that. So we go through this stage where we're just parroting out the teachings, right? I've taken this thing, I've learned this thing, and I'm parroting it out to my audience because I can see it works, right? I can see there's benefit to it. But there's this other layer, and this other layer is where we've really integrated the work, right? We've taken it in, we've sat with it, we've contemplated it, we've put it into practice. We know the challenges, we know the pitfalls. And so this one-to-one support will ensure that you're integrating throughout the program rather than it just being another load of information to take on. So if that sounds like just what you need, like I say, there's 2 places left. I will put the link below, and that link will be a link to a chat with me if that's what you desire. Or you can, you know, if you're the sort of person like me that just goes, yes, I'm in, and just signs up because it feels aligned and I know it's the right next step, I will put that link below too. If you're still with me after all of that, then I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about, as I mentioned, this time of year, what it's great for, and how we can utilize the energy of this season. But before we do that, I'm going to take a sip of tea because I've already gone dry. Bear with. Okay, lovelies. Oh, I do love an autumn brew, don't you? I'm currently on, well, I've just come off the back of Cleanse Week. So during autumn, I mentioned last podcast, you know, we do a cleanse as a way to kind of shift that pitta energy, make sure we're not carrying too much of that fiery burnout into Vata season. And I've just gone into week 3 of cleanse, which is where you start reintroducing things again. And I was so excited this morning because I have made a big batch of chai because I've had no caffeine over the past 2 weeks. And although my brain and my body definitely needed it, I'm really glad to have it back, and I am really glad to be smelling that beautiful chai throughout my house today. So at some point, I'll share my chai recipe with you. In fact, that might be one for the book Shadows. Okay, so I've gone off topic. Back on track, Holly. So this time of year. So let's just take a moment to consider, where are we, right? So as I'm recording this, we're coming to the end of September. We have just celebrated, you may or may not have celebrated, Mabon, which happened about a week ago now. And for those that don't know, Mabon is the second harvest festival in that kind of pagan wheel of the year. And so we have Lughnasadh, which happens around that August time. Then we come into September. We got the second Mabon. We got the second harvest festival, which is Mabon, and then we end the harvest festivals at the end of October with Samhain, or Halloween, 31st of October, which is the final harvest festival. Now, on top of that, we have also had eclipse season. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about eclipse season, how you might be feeling, but also how we can start making the use of those energies that have been going on at this time of year. So eclipse season is often a time, it's generally around that, well, it's in that September period where we have several eclipses all at once. And eclipses are generally a time when things get shaken up. Things get shaken up. We start to see truths we haven't seen before. Perhaps we start getting frustrated by things that before didn't bother us, or things that aren't working out just kind of shift or move away. It's also a time when perhaps, friendships can break down or relationships can break down that are often no longer serving us. So it's this kind of clear out period that happens. And like I say, it can feel a bit shaky. That's the word I want to use. It's like a shaking up of everything you felt like you knew. Everything that felt solid, everything that felt stable can all of a sudden be shaken up, and you can be left feeling a little bit shaken, if I'm honest. So a bit like the trees this time of year where, they're getting whipped around by the winds, we can feel similar. But it also carries beautiful medicine, right? When things are shaken up, we're then given that opportunity to go, okay, so what do I want to actually pick up and take back? What do I want to leave there dead on the ground, like the leaves that are going to wither? And it's also a really beautiful time to check back in with your intentions for the year. So as I was mentioning to my membership ladies, we're going into the last quarter of the year. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that feels absolutely crazy to me. As intentionally as I've been walking this year, I still cannot quite believe that we're coming to the end of September. And the truth is, there is still so much I want to do with this year. And I suspect you might have similar feelings. Perhaps there's goals that you haven't even started yet, or goals that you haven't shifted or moved along as quickly as you'd anticipated or wanted to. Or perhaps there's things that you just haven't even got around to looking at yet because you've been too busy doing other things. And so for me, I feel like this is a really beautiful check-in point in the year to go, okay, where am I? What am I working towards? What feels really important for me right now? What are those things that I would love to have ticked off, to have said that I accomplished, to have worked towards or feel a bit more ahead with by the time that we end this year? And I say end this year, it kind of depends on the calendar you use, right? So in many different faiths and paths, we begin the new year at different times. Some, in the UK, the generally recognized place is the 1st of January, is the new year. However, talking about the Book of Shadows and Samhain, which is a really important festival to me personally, I think it's my favorite festival because I have always associated Samhain with, oh my gosh, how much do I go into this? I won't go into this too much because we could be here all day, but Samhain to me is a really beautiful festival because I associate it with the mythology of walking the labyrinth. And for those that don't know about this I won't go into it too much, but for now, just know that across regions, and it actually in many different civilizations, there's this use of a labyrinth in our spiritual practice and our personal development practice, where and actually using labyrinths, there's many different ways to do that, but I'll share this practice with you that I find really resonates with me. That on Samhain we have this labyrinth, and that can be a metaphorical labyrinth, that could be a physical labyrinth that you create in your garden out of pebbles or rocks or stones. And as I'm saying this, it reminds me of I went to a retreat a fair few years ago now. I'm just thinking about it. I think it was around lockdown, one of the first lockdowns. And I went to this retreat that was actually held at a nunnery in Wales, but it was a Zen retreat. It was a beautiful blend, really beautiful blend. And in the garden of this nunnery, it was a silent retreat, so we didn't talk to anyone. But in the garden, there was this labyrinth, and I spent a lot of time around this labyrinth. Anyway, I've gone off track as usual. But this practice of the labyrinth that I want to share with you is that we metaphorically or physically walk into the labyrinth, considering everything that's happened that year. And on the way out, we consider everything we hope to bring forth in the forthcoming year. Now, you may be thinking, why are you doing that Samhain when New Year is in January? But some of you will be like, oh, okay, you're using the witch's New Year. And yeah, I do. I do kind of think of the end of October as being the end of the year. Mainly because I see that as the end of the harvest, right? It's the end of the harvest period, and then we move in to that next year of where we're preparing the soil and starting to plant the seeds and starting to consider, what do I want to grow in that next abundant season, hopefully, that I can then bring in and harvest. So with that in mind, for me, between now and the end of October, this is a brilliant time to take stock, to really start being honest with myself around, okay, so these goals that I've said I've wanted to do and I haven't done them, what's that about? And don't mean that from a place of self-criticism, right? This is a place of going, like, genuine curiosity. Why is that? Why haven't I moved forward with that goal? Is it because I need some support to make it happen, right? Often as women, you know, we grow up taking on beliefs around we should be able to do it all ourselves, we should be fiercely independent, we shouldn't have to ask for help. And we were often rewarded for the times that we didn't ask for help and we didn't get support and we did it all ourselves. And often this can hold us back in adulthood, because the truth is simply that there are things that we can't do on our own that require help and support. And there's no shame in that, right? There's some things that I find really easy, and there are so many things that I don't. And we're all the same. So this is a time where we get to normalize the fact that we're not good at everything. And some things we're going to need some help and support with. And sometimes that help and support isn't like massive. It might be having an accountability buddy. It might be getting a coach. It might be you've been putting off that thing because you realized you haven't actually got the right skill set around that thing, and you need to do some more training or need to do some more research. This is the perfect time of year to be having those honest conversations with yourself around, okay, why is that thing on my to-do list, on my dream list, on my vision board, in my this is the great thing about working with the moon cycles as well, right? We have that monthly check-in of our goals, our intentions, and how we're getting on. So hopefully we haven't got to this point. But the truth is, right, there's generally at least one thing that gets shifted down on my goal list or intention list every month. Like, oh, I'll get to that. I'll get to that. I'll get to that. And initially it's, oh, I haven't had the time, or I haven't had the energy, or I haven't had the focus, or I haven't had the money. That's a good excuse. It often, harbors a lot of sins, right? These energy, time, money, great excuses. But often when we dig underneath, it's not those things. Those things are just like surface level excuse. When it's like, well, if I really wanted to, I could find the time. If I really wanted to, I could find the money. If I really wanted to, I could find the energy. So what's actually going on here? And I would say the most valuable skill or the most valuable state we can take into that work is that non-judgment curiosity. Because what gets in our way is all the shoulds. Yeah, but I shouldn't, or the shoulds and shouldn'ts, right? So, oh, I shouldn't have to get support. I shouldn't have to like squeeze this thing into my day. I shouldn't have to get up early to make that thing happen. There's a lot of shoulds and shouldn'ts that are often operating in the background subconsciously. But when we can go into absolute non-judgment, curiosity with ourselves around, okay, why haven't I moved forward with this thing? Or the other thing to note here is, one of the things that can often come up is, actually, I don't really want this thing. I've just been told that I should want it. That might be in relation to, like, say, a new car. Perhaps you've had a few friends recently that have bought new cars and you're feeling a little bit insecure about the fact that you're driving a car that's a lot older or less attractive, I have no idea. I have no idea about cars. This is a terrible example. But, and perhaps you put on your to-do list or your intention list or your goal setting list, I want to buy a new car. Yet when you really dug into that, when you got beneath the surface, when you started looking at why am I not doing anything about this? Why am I not putting that money aside? Why am I not going out shopping for new cars? Why am I not looking at ways that I can make this happen? When you start asking yourself the question, the actual reason might be because I don't care. I actually don't care. I don't care if my car's a bit battered. I don't care if it's old. In fact, I would much rather spend my money on something else. And so allow this to be your permission slip to also write off any goals that are no longer lighting you up. To let go of those goals that are coming from a place of wanting to keep up with other people or to fulfill some kind of status symbol if that doesn't make sense to you anymore. So this week, what I would invite you to do is just what I've said. Start to have a look at what was your intentions for this year. Maybe you need to get back out your vision board. Maybe you need to, in the membership, we did, instead of vision boards, we did a painting of a mandala, and we did that through painting meditation. And we laid it up with different intentions. It was a really beautiful practice. If you're interested, the course is still in the membership. But this is an opportunity to get those intentions back out and get really honest with yourself, right? What's working? What's not working? What do you want to be on that list? And there's another part to this I also want to kind of highlight. Now, the truth is, in our life, we go through different seasons of our life. There will be some seasons that are very productive, very fire driven, I want to achieve, I want to be productive. There'll be some seasons where it's a little bit quieter and the work is happening internally, and externally perhaps it doesn't look like a lot changing, but actually you're doing the real work where the real change happens, and perhaps it's not visible yet on the outside. Let's be honest though, that doesn't take long. I think within a few months of doing proper inner work, that proper shadow work, and getting in place some really beautiful self-care practices, within I would say actually within a month you start to see changes in the outside world very quickly. But my point being, this is also an opportunity to consider what season of life are you in. And I don't mean in regards to age. I don't necessarily mean in regards to, any of those stereotypical things that you feel like you should be doing. But for you personally, what stage does this feel like for you? What kind of energy does this stage of your life feel like? And is that how you want it to be? So, for example, I will talk about a couple of different stages. My 20s were probably very much about making a lot of mistakes. Making a lot of mistakes, but also setting myself up for a career. I did most of my training in my 20s in regards to the career I was in at that time. I did my master's degree. I started my family. There was a lot going on. It was a lot of go, go, go. And in many ways, I really enjoyed that. I was in the right energetic state for that. And then my 30s felt a bit messier, if I'm honest. It felt very much, it was a lot of unraveling. unraveling conditioning, doing that healing work, working out who I was, working out what I wanted to do. And then the later part of my 30s was about, okay, so how can I share this with other people? All of these things that have helped me, all of these things that have made such a difference to my life, how can I start sharing that? And throughout all of those, I've also had phases where I've just needed to integrate lessons, where I've just needed to be, where I've just needed to breathe and let things settle. And I've also had periods in that where I'm like, right, we're on it, we're going, we're making this happen, we're manifesting. And, you know, those kind of fiery, energetic seasons have felt awesome too. But I think it's really important to acknowledge, where are you at? And is that the season you want to stay in? Because if it's not, you have the ability to change it, but it does require doing different things. So say, for example, life is feeling really stagnant. So perhaps at first it felt beautiful. You needed a peaceful reset. You needed to allow some things to settle. Perhaps you had to process some things that you've been through and create this beautiful calm period in your life where it was aligned to what you needed. But now perhaps that's starting to feel a bit stagnant and a bit old and a bit restrictive and a bit boring. And you want to start dreaming bigger. But at the same time, this bored stagnancy is also operating as your comfort zone. So if we're going to move into that manifesting, making things happen, we need to transition. And so perhaps those initial goals are just little things that take you outside your comfort zone, that stretch you just a little bit, that mix things up, that shifts things around. So perhaps, for example, let's think of some really good examples. So say, for example, this is the year that you said you were gonna start moving your body more and becoming more strong, right? This is a really important goal actually for women who are coming up to perimenopause, in perimenopause, or past, especially past menopause, and are because, okay, I won't go into this too much, but basically, as our estrogen begins to drop, so does our estrogen is amazing, right? It covers up a multitude of sins. It does so many jobs in the body. But like say, if we're not taking care of ourselves, while we've still got a bit of estrogen, it's fine. It covers up our metabolism. It covers up what's going on in terms of our diet. You know, estrogen is like, and then it starts to deplete. And as it depletes, we're like, oh man, I can't get away with the same things that I used to. And one of those things is we need to do strength training to improve our bone density. So, and it also stops us having issues later on in life. Anyway, I won't go into that too much today, but it's a good goal for all of us to have. So, perhaps this has been your goal for this year, and you've got to it and you're like, you know, I'm not feeling it, I'm not interested, and it hasn't been happening. So perhaps the problem is the goal feels too big, too removed from who you are now. So what we need to do is gently shift who you are now, as opposed to it be this all or nothing thinking. So it's like, what's one thing that would just move me a little bit closer to that goal? And sometimes that one thing, it's something that feels just so easy that you think, well, of course I can do that. So, for example, when I have clients who haven't exercised for a while but want to get back into that pattern, we'll often start with one goal, which is so every day, whatever's happening, whatever the weather, they leave the house and walk to the end of the street and come back. You might be thinking, well, that's just so easy, it's a bit ridiculous. Exactly. It's so easy, it's a bit ridiculous. So what often happens, not always, not every day, but sometimes what happens, we get to the end of the street and think, well, I'm out now. I may as well go for a walk. And so sometimes we have to work with this mind, right? To create these little stepping stones towards the big goal so that it feels more manageable, more within our power, and we're less likely to talk ourselves out of it. So lovelies, this week I'm inviting you to do this. Spend some time thinking about what do you want to do with this last quarter of the year, or the first quarter of this year, depending on how you're viewing that. And what might that mean in terms of real, tangible things you can do? What are those little goals that you can hold yourself to? And don't forget to ask yourself the question, what support do I need to make this happen? It is one of the most powerful questions we can ask. And when I look back at the things that I've shifted and changed in my life, I can't think of a single one that I have done fully on my own. I've had support every step of the way. And that's been, when I say support, sometimes it was from friends, sometimes it was from my husband or my kids. A lot of the time though, if I'm really honest, a lot of the time it was from coaches, it was from teachers, it was from people that were paid to do that for me, because that's exactly what I needed. And the truth is, I saw quite early on that it wasn't, I don't think it's fair. This is a controversial point, but I'm going to say it. I personally do not believe it's fair to rely on a partner or your friends to be your support in the entirety of your life. We need support outside of those biased opinions. We need support from people that don't know us, that can actually work out quite quickly when we're making excuses, when we've got internal blocks going on, rather than the people that are in your community that may know you really well, but they love you too much to tell you the absolute truth. So I'm not saying that you definitely need a coach, but I think you do. But I am saying, be honest with yourself around the level of support that you need to achieve the goals that are on your list, so that actually you're not setting yourself up for endless failure or endless excuses or endless pain and suffering by continuing to look at that goal that you're not going to achieve on your own. But anyway, that's a side note. I hope you take up that invitation this week. In the meantime, don't forget to come join us on Instagram for the 30 days of self-care for your book of shadows. This will be a really lovely journey, actually. If you have been falling out of practice with your self-care because of the Vata energy, because of the chaos of eclipse season, then this is a really great way to get back in touch with that self-care, get it back on the priority list, and make sure you are starting your day from a full cup. And if you've got any questions about anything that I've talked about today, anything that comes up for you, or if you just want to feedback on something that I've said, I would love to hear from you. So feel free to reach out. You can reach out on Instagram, Facebook, you can email me, which is hello@hollyboulet.com. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you next week for another episode of Taking Time to Heal. Take care of yourself, and I will see you soon.